The streetlights hummed faintly against the night sky, stretching pale orange halos over the cracked pavement of a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania. Inside one of the houses, tucked between rows of aging brick homes, a young girl named Elena sat curled up on the edge of her bed. Her hands clutched a frayed blanket that had been hers since childhood, the last piece of comfort she carried from a time when life felt safe. She was 16 now, though her face still carried the softness of a child, and her eyes held a sadness too heavy for her years. Her stepmother, Linda, had been storming around the house all evening, slamming cabinet doors and muttering curses under her breath. Elena had learned to stay silent during these episodes. Silence was her only defense, though even that wasn't always enough. The walls seemed to shake whenever Linda's voice rose, each word cutting deeper than the one before. Elena's father wasn't home. He rarely was anymore, and that absence only gave Linda more room to unleash her cruelty. "Elena!" The voice ripped through the hallway like a whip. "Why didn't you wash the dishes? Do you think I'm your maid? Get out here now!" Elena's body tensed. She wanted to disappear, to crawl into some hidden corner where Linda's words couldn't reach. But she knew that waiting too long would only make things worse. She slid off the bed, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, and stepped carefully into the hall. Linda stood in the kitchen, her face twisted in irritation. She was a woman in her late 40s, sharp features hardened by bitterness, her arms folded tight against her chest. On the counter, a small pile of dishes waited in the sink, barely a handful, but enough to ignite Linda's fury. "I was just finishing my homework," Elena said quietly, her voice almost trembling. "Homework? Don't make excuses. You're lazy, that's what you are. Just like your mother." The mention of her mother stung like a blade. Elena's mother had passed away when she was only 10. Her memories were faint now, her laughter in the kitchen, the smell of her perfume, the way her hands felt when they held her close. All that warmth had been ripped away too soon. And in its place stood Linda, whose presence filled every corner of the house with fear. Elena lowered her head and moved quickly to the sink, her hands working through the soap and water. The clatter of dishes was the only sound between them for a few moments, until Linda let out a sharp sigh. Sometimes when Linda's words tore at her, Elena would write in her notebook, pouring out the feelings she couldn't speak aloud. Her journal became her secret refuge, the place where her voice mattered, even if no one else could hear it. One evening, after another long day of insults and slammed doors, Elena sat by her window, her journal open on her lap. She wrote about the stars, about how they shone even in the darkest nights. She wrote about her mother, imagining her warmth still reaching across the distance, wrapping her in invisible arms. And she wrote about strength, how maybe one day she'd find it within herself to rise above all of this. Her pen slowed, and she glanced out at the night sky again. The stars seemed faint, hidden behind the city's glow, but they were still there, always there. She closed her eyes and whispered again, "Please just give me strength." Far away in the silence of the house, Linda's voice stirred again, calling her name sharply. Elena closed her journal, tucked it beneath her pillow, and stood. The spark inside her flickered, fragile yet unbroken. Tomorrow would come, and with it, another battle. But for now, she carried her whispered prayer like armor, clinging to the hope that someday, somehow life would change. The first snow of December drifted softly outside Elena's window, the flakes dancing in the glow of the streetlight. She traced a finger along the cold glass, wishing she could step outside and feel the flakes dissolve on her skin without worrying about what waited inside the house. Winter had always been her favorite season when she was little. Her mother would bundle her in scarves, laughing as they built lopsided snowmen in the yard. Those memories lived like faded photographs in her heart, warm, distant, and unreachable. Linda's voice cut through the silence like a siren. "Elena, why aren't the floors cleaned yet? I told you an hour ago." Elena flinched. She set her pencil down on the notebook balanced against her knees. She'd been sketching, letting her hand wander into lines and shapes that felt freer than her thoughts. Now she closed it quickly, hiding the fragile piece of herself away before standing. The wooden floor creaked under her bare feet as she moved down the hall. The mop leaned against the wall in the corner of the kitchen, waiting like a weapon she was always meant to wield. She grabbed it, dipping it into the bucket of soapy water, and began pushing it back and forth across the floor. Linda stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. Her eyes, sharp and watchful, followed Elena's every move. "Faster, You're dragging like an old woman. Do you think people will ever respect you if you can't even clean a floor right? Elena's grip on the handle tightened, her knuckles pale. She kept her eyes low, moving the mop rhythmically to keep herself steady. Inside, though, her chest ached with the words she longed to say but never could. Her father walked in just then, shaking the snow from his coat. He looked tired, as he always did after long shifts at the factory. He glanced briefly at Elena, then at Linda, before setting his boots by the door. "Dinner ready?" he asked flatly. Linda rolled her eyes. "Of course it is, but you might want to tell your daughter to stop acting like a useless child." Elena's heart fluttered in her chest. She waited just for a moment, hoping her father might defend her. But he only sighed, sat at the table, and unfolded the evening paper. No words, no glance, no shield between her and Linda's sharp tongue. By the time the floors were finished and dinner cleared away, the night pressed heavy around her. Elena returned to her room, her journal waiting like a trusted friend. She wrote about her day, about the sting of Linda's words, about the way her father's silence hurt even more. Then, almost without realizing it, she wrote a line that startled her. "One day, I will leave this house." She stared at the words, her heart racing. Leaving had always felt impossible. Where would she go? Who would take her in? But something inside whispered that it wasn't just a fantasy. It could be a future, if she was brave enough to chase it. At school, life wasn't much easier. She kept her head down, drifting through classes like a shadow. But one afternoon in the library, a voice startled her. "Hey, you're in my history class, right? Elena?" She looked up to see a boy standing by her table. He was tall, with messy brown hair and kind eyes that seemed to carry curiosity rather than judgment. His name was Jason, though she only knew it from hearing the teacher call attendance. "Yeah," she said softly. He smiled, pulling out a chair across from her. "You're always writing in that notebook. Are you like working on a novel or something?" Her cheeks warmed. No one had ever asked about her writing before. She shook her head quickly. "It's just nothing important." Jason leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I bet it's important to you, though." She didn't know how to respond. Her instinct told her to shut down, to hide. But something in his voice felt genuine, not mocking. She shrugged. "I guess. It's just where I put things I can't say out loud." Jason nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's cool. Most people just scroll through their phones and complain. You actually do something with it." Elena almost smiled. It was the first time in a long time that someone had made her feel like she mattered. Over the next few weeks, their conversations in the library became more frequent. Jason never pushed too hard, never asked questions that felt like traps. He talked about music, his dog, the snowboarding trip he wanted to take over winter break. Slowly, Elena found herself opening up, not about Linda or her father, but about the things she loved, books, the stars, the way drawing made her feel free. For the first time in years, she felt seen. But at home, the cruelty continued. Linda's insults grew sharper, her demands harsher. One night, when Elena forgot to fold the laundry the exact way Linda wanted, she felt the sting of a slap across her cheek. The shock froze her in place, her skin burning. Linda's voice hissed like venom in her ear. "Don't you dare cry. You deserve worse." Elena ran to her room, her tears falling freely now. She pressed her hand against her cheek, her body trembling. She wanted to scream, to shatter the walls with all the pain she held inside. Instead, she pulled out her journal, her pen scratching furiously across the page. "I can't keep living like this. One day I will be free. I have to be." Her hands shook as she wrote, but the words felt like a vow. Days turned into weeks, and the weight on her chest grew heavier. But so did the quiet fire in her heart. Jason's kindness at school became a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone in the world wanted to break her. And her journal, now filled with pages upon pages of thoughts, became proof that she still had a voice, no matter how hard Linda tried to silence it. Then came the night of the storm. Snow hammered against the windows, the wind howling through the cracks of the old house. Power flickered, plunging the rooms into darkness. Linda shouted from downstairs, cursing the outage, ordering Elena to fetch candles. Elena moved carefully through the dark, her hands brushing against the walls. As she lit the candles one by one, her eyes caught her reflection in the dim glow. The bruise on her cheek had faded, but the shadow of it lingered in her mind. Something inside her shifted. She wasn't sure if it was the storm outside, the memory of her mother's warmth, or the way Jason's words had reminded her she was more than Linda's victim. But in that moment, she realized the truth. She didn't want to survive anymore. She wanted to live. She carried the candles to the table, setting them down without a word. Linda muttered about the cold, her voice sharp as always, but Elena didn't flinch. She held the flickering flame in her gaze, her mind turning toward the vow she had written in her journal. One day she would leave. One day soon. And as the storm raged outside, Elena felt, for the first time in years, a fragile thread of courage weaving itself through her fear. January settled over the small Pennsylvania town with a bitter chill. The holidays had passed without warmth, the house filled only with Linda's complaints and her father's silence. Elena tried not to notice the way neighbors decorated their porches with twinkling lights, how the kids on the street laughed as they played in the snow. She watched from her window, unseen, her journal open on her lap. Her words had changed in recent weeks. They were no longer just fragments of pain. They were plans whispered in ink. She wrote about the possibility of working after school, about saving even the smallest scraps of money. She wrote about colleges, though the idea felt distant, almost like a fantasy. Most of all, she wrote about leaving, not in anger, not as a runaway, but as a girl determined to find a life beyond the shadows of this house. School had become her refuge. Jason still met her in the library most afternoons, his easy laughter softening the edges of her days. She never told him about Linda, but he seemed to sense the heaviness she carried. He didn't pry. Instead, he filled the silence with stories and encouragement. One afternoon, as they sat across from each other, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "Here," he said, his smile almost shy. Elena unfolded it carefully. Inside was a sketch of a girl sitting by a window, staring at the stars. The lines were rough, but the feeling behind it was strong. "I tried to draw you," Jason said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're always looking out the window in class like you're somewhere else." Her throat tightened. No one had ever noticed her like that before. She traced the drawing with her fingertips, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's beautiful," Jason grinned. "I'll make you another one, but only if you promise to show me one of your drawings someday." Elena hesitated, then nodded slowly. For the first time, she felt like maybe sharing a piece of herself wasn't so dangerous after all. At home, though, things grew darker. Linda's cruelty escalated with every small mistake. One evening, when Elena returned from school a few minutes later than expected, Linda accused her of sneaking around and threatened to lock her in her room. Her father sat in his chair, silent, pretending not to hear. Elena lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. Her heart pounded with the weight of choices she wasn't ready to make. But something inside her whispered again, "You can't stay here forever." The next day, she lingered after school, walking through the quiet halls until the janitor reminded her the building was closing. She stepped outside into the freezing air, her breath forming clouds around her face. For a moment, she imagined walking past her street, past her house, and never looking back. The thought scared her, but it also lit a spark of hope. She pulled out her phone, an old model with a cracked screen, and searched quietly for part-time jobs nearby. Most places wanted someone older, but a local diner had posted about hiring dishwashers. Her hands trembled as she saved the number. She didn't know how she'd explain it to Linda, but the idea of earning even a few dollars for herself felt like a step toward freedom. That evening, while Linda berated her for forgetting to vacuum the living room, Elena's mind was elsewhere. She imagined walking into the diner, asking for work, holding her first paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Days later, when she finally gathered the courage to stop by the diner, the manager, a kind woman named Marissa, looked her over with a mixture of concern and warmth. "You're still in high school?" Marissa asked gently. "Yes," Elena admitted, twisting her hands. "But I can work evenings after classes." Marissa studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll give it a try. It's tough work, but you'll learn quickly. You'll start with the dishes." Relief flooded Elena's chest. She thanked Marissa quietly, promising she wouldn't let her down. The first shifts were exhausting. She stood for hours, scrubbing plates, her hands raw from the hot water. But she didn't mind. The diner was noisy, alive with chatter and music, nothing like the heavy silence of home. Sometimes, when the rush slowed, Marissa slipped her a free slice of pie or a cup of cocoa. Those small acts of kindness felt like lifelines, reminders that the world wasn't entirely cruel. Jason noticed the change in her. "You seem lighter," he said one afternoon in the library. Elena smiled faintly. "I got a job." His eyes lit up. "That's awesome. Where?" "The diner on Main Street. It's just dishes, but—" She trailed off, unsure how much to reveal. "But it's yours," Jason finished for her. She nodded, her heart warming at his understanding. At home, she hid the job carefully. She told Linda she was staying late for school projects, and surprisingly, Linda didn't question much. Her father barely noticed at all. For the first time, Elena felt like she had a secret world of her own, one Linda couldn't touch. Still, the nights remained hard. Linda's moods grew more unpredictable, her words sharper. Sometimes Elena lay in bed, listening to her father and Linda argue downstairs, her chest tight with fear. Other times the silence was worse, stretching heavy through the halls. But now she had her journal. She had Jason, she had the diner, and slowly she began to believe she could shape a future beyond these walls. One snowy evening after her shift, Elena walked home beneath the glow of the streetlights. Her paycheck, small but real, was folded carefully in her pocket. She planned to hide it beneath the loose floorboard in her closet, her secret savings. As she turned the corner onto her street, she looked up at the houses, their windows glowing warmly against the cold. For a moment she imagined herself in one of them, laughing with a family who cared, a family who saw her. The thought made her chest ache, but it also fueled her resolve. When she reached her house, the door creaked open before she could even touch the handle. Linda stood there, her eyes narrowing. "Where have you been?" Elena's breath caught. Her excuse was ready, study group. But Linda's gaze was sharper than usual, her suspicion stronger. "I was at school," Elena said carefully. Linda's lips curled into a sneer. "Don't lie to me. You think I don't notice? You disappear. You come home smelling like grease and soap." "What are you hiding?" Panic surged through Elena's chest. She tried to speak, but no words came. Linda stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "If I find out you're sneaking around, you'll regret it." Elena swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain still. Inside, though, her fire burned stronger. She knew then that she couldn't hide forever. She would have to make a choice sooner than she expected. That night she wrote in her journal with trembling hands, "I have to be brave. I can't let her break me. I don't know how or when, but I will get out. I will." The words blurred as tears smudged the ink, but she pressed the pen harder, carving her vow into the page. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the exhaustion, she felt it again. That fragile thread of courage, growing stronger with each day. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she believed it was hers to claim. The bitter winds of February whipped through the town, rattling the loose shutters of the old houses and sending icy drafts. Under every door, Elena pulled her jacket tighter around her as she left the diner, her breath clouding in the air. The pay envelope in her pocket was heavier this week, 2 full shifts added on top of her. Regular hours, and she planned to tuck every dollar away beneath the floorboard in her room. Each paycheck was more than money. It was proof she could carve a life beyond Linda's reach. But tonight, as she walked home, dread pressed against her ribs. Linda had grown sharper lately, her suspicion hovering like a storm waiting to break. Elena replayed the conversation from a week ago when Linda had nearly caught her lie. Her palms still sweated from the memory. The house loomed in the darkness, its windows dim compared to the cheerful glow of the neighbors. Elena hesitated at the porch, clutching her backpack strap, then stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately, but so did Linda's voice. "Where have you been?" Linda was waiting in the living room, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing. The television flickered behind her, but she wasn't watching it. She was watching Elena. "I told you," Elena said softly. "Study group." "Don't lie to me." Linda's voice cracked like a whip. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't smell grease on your clothes? Where are you going every night?" Elena froze. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell the truth, that she had a job, that she was saving to escape. But she knew what would follow. Linda would shut it down, maybe forbid her from leaving the house altogether. "I was just helping a friend with homework," Elena whispered, her voice barely holding steady. Linda stepped closer, her face inches away, her breath sharp with bitterness. "You think you can sneak around behind my back? You're nothing without me. Nothing. Don't ever forget that." Elena's father shuffled into the room, still in his work boots, his expression weary. "Linda, enough. She's just a kid." Linda snapped her head toward him, her eyes narrowing. "You don't know half of it. She's lying. I can feel it." Her father sighed, rubbing his forehead. "She's 16. Let it go." But he didn't defend her further. He never did. He turned, retreating to his chair in the corner, his silence louder than any of Linda's insults. Elena slipped past them, her heart pounding, and shut herself in her room. She slid the envelope from her pocket and lifted the floorboard, tucking the money into its hiding place. Her hands shook as she replaced the board, her breath unsteady. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Linda was growing too suspicious. The walls were closing in. If she waited too long, her chance might slip away. The next afternoon at school, she told Jason. They sat in their usual spot in the library, books open but forgotten between them. "She's starting to figure it out," Elena said, her voice low. Jason frowned. "Figure what out?" Elena hesitated. She'd never told him the full truth. The words felt heavy on her tongue, but something in his eyes, steady, patient, kind, gave her courage. "I've been working at the diner," she admitted. "I'm saving money because I can't stay in that house forever." Jason's brows furrowed. "Is it really that bad?" She nodded, her throat tightening. Linda, she makes me feel like I'm nothing. And my dad? He doesn't stop her. He just sits there." Jason's jaw clenched, anger flickering in his eyes. "That's not okay, none of it. You don't deserve that." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I'm scared she'll find out. If she does, she'll take everything, and I'll be stuck there forever." Jason leaned across the table, his voice firm. "Then you have to be careful. Smarter than her? You've already started. You're stronger than you think, Elena." The words sank into her chest like a seed, fragile but alive. Stronger than she thought. Maybe he was right. Over the next weeks, Elena grew bolder in her planning. She spent hours in the library, not just with Jason, but alone, researching colleges, financial aid, and programs that supported students in difficult home situations. She wrote down phone numbers, websites, anything that might offer her a lifeline. Each note she tucked into the back of her journal, her secret map to freedom. At the diner, Marissa noticed her exhaustion. One night, as Elena scrubbed a mountain of dishes, Marissa touched her shoulder gently. "Honey, you're working too hard. Is everything all right?" Elena forced a small smile. "I'm fine, I just need the money." Marissa studied her, concern softening her features. But she didn't press. Instead, she slid a piece of pie onto the counter, on the house. "Eat before you fall over." Elena's chest warmed. Small kindnesses like that reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel. But Linda's suspicion only grew. One evening, Elena came home to find her room torn apart, drawers pulled open, clothes thrown across the floor, even her mattress lifted. Panic surged through her as she rushed to the floorboard. The money was still there, hidden just deep enough that Linda hadn't found it. Relief washed over her, but it was thin, fragile. Linda wasn't done. At dinner that night, Linda's eyes burned holes into her. "I don't know what you're hiding, but I'll find out. And when I do, don't think for a second I'll let you get away with it." Elena stabbed at her food silently, her appetite gone. Across the table, her father kept his gaze fixed on his plate. His silence hurt more than Linda's words ever could. Later in her room, Elena opened her journal with trembling hands. She wrote until the page filled with jagged lines, her fear spilling out in ink. "She will never stop. I have to leave. I don't know how, but I will. I swear it." Her pen pressed so hard the paper nearly tore, but the vow felt stronger this time, more urgent. The following week, Linda's anger reached a breaking point. Elena had come home late from the diner, the snow clinging to her coat. Linda was waiting at the door, her face twisted with rage. "Where were you?" she demanded. "I told you, school project," Elena replied, her voice steady though her hands shook. Linda slapped the backpack from her shoulder, the contents spilling onto the floor. Among the notebooks and pens, a folded piece of paper slid out. The diner schedule. Elena's heart plummeted. Linda snatched it up, her eyes narrowing as she read. "You've been working." "Behind my back?" Elena's chest heaved. I needed... "You needed what? Money? You think you can run away from me? You're a child. You'll never survive out there." Her voice rose, echoing through the house. Her father appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Linda, stop! Don't tell me to stop," Linda snapped, waving the schedule in the air. "She's been lying to us for months." Elena stood frozen, her pulse thundering in her ears. This was it. The truth was out. The fragile balance she had maintained was shattered. Linda's voice lowered, venom dripping from each word. "You're not going anywhere, Elena. Do you hear me? I'll make sure of it." Something inside Elena broke then, not in weakness, but in defiance. Her fear, her silence, all the years of shrinking into herself. They burned away in that moment. She lifted her chin, her voice trembling but fierce. "You can't stop me." The room went silent. Linda's eyes widened, shocked by the sudden spark in the girl she thought she had broken. Elena's father stared at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. And for the first time, Elena felt the weight shift. Not gone, not yet, but moving. The fire inside her was no longer a flicker. It was flame. The days after Linda's discovery unfolded like a storm. The tension inside the house thickened, the air heavy with unspoken threats. Linda no longer bothered with veiled suspicion. Her anger poured into every glance, every word, every slammed cupboard door. She began locking the front door during the day, pocketing the keys, muttering that Elena needed to be kept in line. Elena paced her room, her heart pounding each time she heard Linda's footsteps in the hall. She had almost lost everything that night, when the diner schedule fell into Linda's hands. But even in the midst of terror, something had shifted inside her. The fire that had sparked when she whispered, "You can't stop me," hadn't gone out. It burned brighter every day. At school, she pulled Jason aside, her voice urgent. "She knows. About the job. I don't have much time." Jason's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" She found the schedule. "She's watching me constantly now. I think she'll try to cut me off completely. I need to get out before she takes everything." Jason gripped her hands tightly. "Then let's make a plan. You're not alone in this." For the next week, they planned in secret. Jason connected her with Ms. Harper, a school counselor he trusted, who listened quietly as Elena haltingly shared pieces of her story. The insults, the control, the way her father's. Silence weighed heavier than Linda's. Cruelty. Ms. Harper didn't push for every detail, but her eyes brimmed with concern. "You don't deserve to live like that," she said firmly. "There are options. Shelters, youth programs, even legal steps. If you're ready, we can help you." Elena swallowed hard. The idea of leaving terrified her, stepping into an unknown world, relying on strangers. But staying meant being crushed until nothing was left of her. That night, she crept into her room, her journal trembling in her hands. She wrote until her tears blurred the ink. "This is it. I will leave. I don't know where I'll end up, but anywhere is better than here. I have to be brave. I have to." The next evening, as Linda ranted about the dinner being too cold and slammed her fork onto the table, Elena felt something inside her snap. She stared at the woman who had made her feel worthless for so long, and for the first time she didn't shrink. After dinner, she went to her room and pulled out the small duffel bag she had hidden under the bed. One by one, she packed essentials, clothes, her journal, the small stash of money from the floorboard. She tucked in the photo of her mother, the only piece of her childhood that gave her comfort. Her hands shook, but her resolve did not. 2 nights later, the chance came. Linda was distracted with a neighbor, gossip spilling like venom on the front porch. Her father was asleep in his chair, the television flickering silently across his blank face. Elena slipped the duffel over her shoulder, her heart racing so hard she thought it might give her away. She reached for the front door, then froze. The lock. Her pulse roared in her ears. She fumbled quietly through the kitchen drawers, praying Linda hadn't taken every key. At last, beneath a pile of rubber bands and old receipts, she found one. Her breath caught in her throat as she slid it into the lock. The click was soft but thunderous in her ears. "Elena." She froze, her blood turning to ice. Her father stood in the hallway, his eyes half open, his voice groggy. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Elena's voice broke. "I can't stay here. Please don't stop me." His gaze flickered between the bag on her shoulder and the desperation in her eyes. For once, he didn't look away. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But anywhere is better than this." His face crumpled, guilt etched deep into the lines around his mouth. For years he had been silent, watching Linda tear her down, pretending not to see. And now, in the dim light of the hallway, he seemed to understand the cost of his silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded bill. $20. Wrinkled and worn, he pressed it into her hand. Go, be safe. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't dare speak. She squeezed his hand once, then turned the knob and slipped into the night. The cold air hit her like freedom. She ran down the street, her breath steaming, her duffel bouncing against her side. Her heart pounded with terror and exhilaration all at once. For the first time, the road ahead was hers alone. Jason was waiting at the corner in his old beat-up car, the engine idling. When he saw her, relief washed over his face. She threw the duffel into the back seat and climbed in, her hands trembling. You did it, he whispered. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. They drove through the sleeping town, the streetlights flickering past like fading stars. Elena clutched her mother's photo in her lap, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Fear still pressed against her ribs, fear of what Linda would do when she found her gone, fear of what tomorrow might bring. But beneath it all was something new, hope. Jason pulled up in front of a small building. On the edge of town, the youth shelter Ms. Harper had connected them with. Its windows glowed warmly against the dark, a beacon in the night. Are you ready? Jason asked gently. Elena stared at the building, her future wrapped in its walls. Her palms were damp, her knees unsteady, but she nodded. Yeah, I'm ready. Inside, a kind-eyed woman welcomed her, taking the duffel and offering her a seat. Papers were filled out, questions asked. But Elena floated through it all in a haze. The word safe place echoed again and again, wrapping around her like a blanket. Later, lying in a clean bed under a soft quilt, Elena stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of Linda's voice crushing her. She didn't hear the endless echo of "you're nothing." Instead, she heard Jason's words, "You're stronger than you think." And for the first time, she believed them. Still, she knew the battle wasn't over. Linda wouldn't let her go quietly. Tomorrow might bring new challenges, legal fights, painful confrontations, shadows of fear that clung to her memory. But tonight, as she closed her eyes, she let herself breathe. She let herself imagine a life where she wasn't defined by cruelty, but by her own strength. The flame inside her was no longer small. It was blazing, and it would carry her through whatever came next. Morning light filtered through the shelter's curtains, soft and unfamiliar. Elena stirred beneath the quilt, blinking against the brightness. For a moment, she forgot where she was. No yelling in the kitchen. No footsteps pacing the hall. No fear clamping down on her chest. Just quiet. Then the memories flooded back. The escape, her father's weary face, the $20 bill pressed into her palm. The world outside Linda's control had felt impossible for so long, yet here she was, free. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. A staff member entered, smiling warmly. Breakfast is ready when you are, and later Ms. Harper will be stopping by to check in. Elena nodded, her throat tight. Thank you. The cafeteria smelled of pancakes and coffee. Other teens sat at scattered tables, some chatting, some silent. Elena chose a corner seat, folding her hands in her lap. She felt out of place, like a shadow among strangers. But when one of the younger girls offered her a tentative smile, she found herself smiling back. I am not what she said I was. I am not nothing. I am not broken. I am still here. Tears blurred the words, but she didn't wipe them away. They weren't tears of weakness. They were proof of survival. Months passed. Her grades improved, her laughter returned in fragments, and the nightmares came less often. Linda's shadow still haunted her at times, her voice echoing in memory. But it no longer defined her. Each day, the fire inside grew steadier, stronger. On the last day of school, Jason found her by the lockers. So, he said with a grin, you ready for the future? Elena smiled, slipping her journal into her backpack. I think I am. The shelter had helped her apply for scholarships, and in the fall, she would leave for a small college 2 states away, a fresh start, a chance to build a life of her own making. That night, as she stood outside beneath the stars, she whispered a final vow into the quiet air. I am free, and I will never go back. Her voice didn't tremble. It rang clear, strong, carried into the night like a promise to herself. And somewhere deep inside, the girl who had once cowered beneath Linda's rage finally laid her fear to rest. Elena had walked through fire, but she had come out not as ash, but as flame.